It's kind of a weak, timid little clap.
Are you talking about mine or yours?
No, mine. That was me. I don't know. I just sort of stopped midstream.
Usually your clap like
It was
breaks
a big clap,
eardrums. Yeah. All right. Hey, welcome to On This Hill, a podcast of Church on the Hill.
And we were on the hill this morning. Well,
Yeah, that's
actually
true.
This afternoon. It's a beautiful day.
It is a beautiful day out.
We're in
Yeah.
August. For those of you that are listening,
Yeah.
we're going to be in August.
Yeah. We started a kind of a new segment in a new series, I should say, maybe in our podcast that we named When Are We?
Yeah. Which is kind of an odd
Yeah.
grammar thing, right? When are we? It should
Yeah.
be where are we, but
Yeah.
when are we? Why would we call it when are we?
Yeah, good question. I was thinking about that, thinking about how when you're a kid and you're in a car,
Yeah.
and you're just in the car and you're a little kid and
You have
they're
no idea of time
driving,
or
yeah,
space,
and you
right?
fall asleep and you wake up and you say, "Where are we?" And you could be anywhere. You could have been asleep for an hour. You could have been asleep for 5 minutes. You're not sure. But I think it's similar to that in asking this question of what time are we in? What are the times?
Yeah.
So we talk a lot about culture. What is the culture that we're living in? How has the culture changed? It's another way of talking about culture, I think, is what times are we in?
Yeah.
And I think in Christianity we have a long history, too, of talking about the times and paying attention to deep time, long amounts of time. We look backwards in time quite a
History,
ways.
looking at history.
Yeah, as Christian, as people of faith, we look backwards towards, we call Abraham Father Abraham, and that's a long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
The crucifixion is 2,000 years ago, and it's the seminal moment in Christian history that changes everything for us. So I think we have a history and of repeating and looking at what time are we in? What is the culture saying right now? Because we're called to progress, yes, but also to hold on to some things. So time might change around us, but what does it do to us and our practices, our faith, our Christian practices?
Yeah, and I think just even the examination of history, or maybe learning from history, studying history, is such a valuable exercise. You know, the old adage: people who forget history are bound to repeat it. And I think in the last century there was no century where that was more evident than in the last century. 2 world wars, multiple skirmishes. All kinds of revolutions all over the world, and left and right and so forth, and some have endured and some have not.
Yeah.
But that's always been fascinating to me about people who can look back. If you were to look back carefully, you can see a clear pattern of failure, and yet still think, but that was then and this is now, and we're different.
Yeah.
It's going to be different for me, and ultimately the principles take it in a direction that it's bound to go.
Yeah, we were kind of talking a little bit about that earlier about, I don't know, new generations that want to experiment with something they've never tried before.
Right.
But it has been
It
tried.
has been tried.
They just haven't tried it before, and they're convinced, like, oh no, we know how to do this. We're going to do this right. We're not going to run into the same problems as the past. But that's not necessarily true.
Isn't it fascinating? Like in the last couple of years, the kind of the rallying cry is go to the science. What does science say? And science can be a lot of things, obviously, and it's not that we're not anti-science by any stretch. But science, one of the things science does is it tracks data. And so there are things that science has tracked and sort of obvious that, hey, that particular idea doesn't work or doesn't produce good fruit. A good case in point, maybe we can throw this grenade out there, is the whole idea of legalizing the drug trade. A fascinating article in the New York Times just this week about, so how's that experiment? I mean, Portland, we made the front page, folks,
we sure did.
of the New York Times. But the idea is that city that experimented with this idea of legalizing drugs, and people on the ground in Portland were interviewed, and some were very adamantly against it. And most of those were people that have to live with it on the street, in the sense of shop owners, business owners, law enforcement, family members. But then there was a whole other group of people that said, we haven't given it enough time, and there hasn't been enough resources. So somewhere around $340 million in the last year has been spent on trying to get people into treatment and so forth. And we're not here to debate all that. But the point is like, well, how much data do you need? How much science do you need to look at this before you say it's time to either A, pull the plug, or admit that maybe parts of this are never going to work. They're contrary to human nature.
Yeah, I know. Just recently, the mayor of Portland said, well, we're going to make the use of drugs in public illegal.
Yeah, they're going to try to fine it or criminalize
Yeah, so
it to some degree.
it's still not illegal to do drugs, but it's illegal to do drugs in public, is my understanding. Maybe I have a simplistic view of it. But I don't think the problem with people's addictions are that it's illegal or legal.
Right.
It's not a legal or illegal problem.
Yeah.
It's a chemical problem. It's a biological problem. It's a spiritual problem.
Right.
But it's not really. The problem was it was illegal. But if we'll just make it legal, then everything will be all right. That's just not proven to be true. So yeah, there's a great example of the times we're in, the things that we've tried in the past that maybe we need to pay attention to. I know when I talk to people, often I'll ask them just their age, because I think our the times, like the personal times that we're in, have assignments too. Like if someone's in their 20s and they don't know what to do with their life, I'm like, well, I don't know if you're supposed to exactly know what you're going to do with your life right now.
Sure.
So why don't you try a little bit of everything? Why don't you serve here and serve there, and learn from people who do know what they're supposed to do with their life. Like attach yourself to someone with a great mission in life and go serve them for a while and see what that looks like. You'll know soon whether that's what you're supposed to do or not after doing it. That's a great thing to do in your 20s. There's another thing to do in your 30s, another thing to do in your 40s. And so I think it's worth talking about the times we live in and the time of life that I'm in as well. Because the times that we live in, I don't really have a whole lot to do with. I don't get to choose the times, the culture that we're in. This is the culture we're in. Whether I like it or not, this is the culture and the time that I'm in.
And the results some of it are still out there somewhere in the future.
Yeah. But then there's my personal time and where I am in my life and what I should be doing in the assignment that God has given me at this time of my life.
Isn't it interesting that in the Old Testament, for example, in the book of Jeremiah, when the people of God found themselves in a mess, they found themselves in captivity, occupied by a foreign army, freedoms taken away, slavery, oppression, everything. And what does God tell the prophet to tell the people? Stand at the crossroads and ask for the ancient path, not ask for the new thing or the cutting edge thing. God says, go back to ancient paths. Yeah. He said, because in that you're going to find your salvation. And so there's something about the God of, and of course the God that we believe in, the God of Christianity is this beginning now and forevermore. It's this God who lives outside of time. And so he sees history and he sees the arc of history from a totally different perspective.
Yeah, that's interesting. That is interesting what you're just saying. I'm just thinking about it. Seek for the ancient paths. Because I think we're very enamored with the new.
Yeah. Yeah, anything old seems to be suspect.
Yeah, everything old is suspect. Everything new is shiny and pretty and going to solve everything. Yeah. Artificial intelligence is here and it's going to solve a lot of our problems, and pretty soon we won't even have to work because AI will be doing it for us, and we'll go to a post-work economy, a utopia of the future. And but those things, they've been tried before. We're going to build something that's going to rule over us, or something smarter than us. I mean, it's interesting when you talk about. I don't know how I got on AI, and I apologize if we don't need to be on this rabbit trail, but. Just that idea, because the more I hear people talk about artificial intelligence, the more it sounds like God talk and theology talk. Matter of fact, some of them are even saying we're building a God.
Right.
We're making a God. And
repository of all knowledge and understanding.
Yeah, and yet they are not interested in looking at thousands of years of theological history and thinking on this matter, where wise people have put a lot of thought into God and gods and what it means to serve a God. Yeah. But we don't need any of that. We're in a brave new world. There's going to be a revolution. But I don't know how new it is.
But isn't it interesting, back to the rant, a little bit of mini rant on science. Again, I love science. I believe in science. I believe in research and technology and all those kinds of things that have made our lives wonderful. But science isn't infallible. Science should not get a free pass. Science gave us amazing cures for diseases and has given us technology that has made our lives better, more efficient, more effective, relieved suffering. Yeah. But science also has made few missteps. Asbestos is a bit of a misstep, isn't it? I mean, now
it was the wonder material that was going to solve a lot of problems.
It was going to solve a lot of our problems. And in fact, the odd thing is that it actually had some qualities as far as insulation and sound and so on that bettered our lives. But later on, they discovered, who would have known that it's carcinogenic? It's cancer causing.
Yeah, plastics were amazing, and we got to stop cutting down these trees for paper bags. We're going to move to plastics.
Yeah.
And now, if you ask for plastic, no, you can't even buy plastic.
You're killing
here.
the ocean.
Yeah, there's microplastics in everything. It's in your bloodstream. So
lead was in pipes. Lead was in makeup. Lead was in all kinds of things. Lead was in food, and everybody thought it was the miracle chemical that would make. And they realized later, actually, it's toxic. So, point is that sometimes, this is where I love this passage of scripture in Ecclesiastes, where the writer said, "The end is better than the beginning." You think, well, that's kind of weird. The beginning is where all the energy is. The beginning is where all the vision is. The beginning is where all the excitement, cutting edges. But actually, if you think about what he said, it's really true. Yeah. The end is better than the beginning because the end reveals wisdom that the beginning conceals.
Right.
Mm-hmm. In the end, I realized, you know what? That wasn't as great of an idea as everybody said it was. But I didn't know it when I started because I was excited or there was, again, emotion or whatever. But the end is better than the beginning because it reveals what is concealed in the beginning. There's wisdom.
Going back just one step to science, I've been reading a lot recently about the issues within science and falsification of data and how tempting it is for scientists to falsify data, and how much they're going back and looking and realizing like, oh, wow, we have an academic problem, back here where people are getting funding for things. And I just think it's interesting because it's a sin problem. There is no... You can't just say, well, we're going to live in this Spock world where we're just going to be purely logical. I've been rewatching some of the old Star Trek, so forgive me. We're going to be purely logical. We're not going to have emotions about this. We're just only going to look at the facts. But we're human. We can't divorce our emotions from ourselves. There is no Spock amongst us. Yeah. The scientist is not the purely logical person that you want him to be. The same way that the theologian isn't, the pastor isn't, the mechanic isn't. None of us are. And so we need something outside of ourselves to help us know right from wrong and to navigate those paths, an ancient path that's been worn over and over again, that is true, that has proven itself over and over again. And that's a God path.
That's the key. Isn't that the key, what you just said, that it's proven itself, that is trustworthy? And that's how trust is built, right? Trust is really built on actions that have been tracked for a period of time, right? Isn't that kind of what we do when we're approaching marriage? We don't just marry the first person we meet at the party. We spend time with this person. We date this person. We investigate this person. We ask questions about life, about food, about children, about careers and values and all kinds of things. I'm doing this right now. We're in the summer around here in the church world is wedding world, right? So everybody's getting married. So we sit down with these couples who are young and hopefully in love and so forth, and they want to spend the rest of their lives together. But they realize as we sit down and start to ask questions, there's a lot they don't know about each other. And again, that's not the end of the world, but the fact that I'm about to entrust my life to you, my future to you, I want it to go well. I want it to prosper. I want a marriage that's successful and happy and fulfilling and a place of, joy. I don't get married to be miserable. I get married to be happy. So I think smart people, I think wise people will vet not vet, maybe that's not the right word, like you're trying to buy a car, but I think, isn't that, I want to know, can I trust my heart with you?
Yeah.
Can I trust my body with you?
So, explore, examine. Get to know one another. It is surprising to me sometimes when we sit down with people and do premarital, the questions they haven't yet asked. Sometimes even if they've spent a long time together, but they've just, it's nobody's fault. You haven't been down the road of marriage yet, so you don't even know what you don't know. I don't know what questions I should be asking. Right. Yeah. Or, the little things that pop up of, well, he seems to spend a little bit more money than me, but we'll figure that out. Yeah. Like, will you figure that out? Because maybe you should talk about it now. It'd be easier to talk about now than to get into marriage and realize, oh, actually, no, there's a major problem here. We don't see eye to eye on this topic.
And what that, of course, creates is some form of, oftentimes, maybe conflict or disillusionment or disappointment. Like, oh, I really thought that you would have thought like me on this subject. So again, we're kind of back to history, right? What
Yeah.
we want to do is we're marrying a person in the present, but we're marrying into what we're going to become or what they're going to become, because as single people coming into a marriage, we're not done changing. In fact,
Yeah.
some of the changing has just begun. So what do I want to know about you? I want to know about your history. I want to know what makes you tick. I want to know what has disappointed you. I want to know what brings you life.
So if let's try this. If we go back to that title of When Are We? And you had to say, like, okay, imagine history is a chapter book, and I've got to put a chapter on this time that we're in right now.
Yeah.
I've got to put a title. It's not just going to be chapter 15. It has to have a title. What title would you give the time that we're in right now?
Ooh, that's a great question, no? Yeah, I would say conflicted. Conflicted times. It's kind of like I think if I was to put it in a kind of a word picture, it's the confluence of two rivers, two streams, powerful, and where they come together, there's a lot of turbulence, and I think we have that going on right now in our culture. We have streams of thought, streams of experience, and they're kind of coming together. And this, where we see it, like in this country right now, is perhaps like next year in an election year. We see this confluence of ideas, and it creates a bunch of turbulence. But I think if we could slow down and listen to each other and ask good questions, I think we would see that we have more in common than we have. There's more that can unite us than divide us. Of course, that's not the case today, because it's very polarized. Politics is polarized. Religion is polarized. Everything is us or them. You're with us or you're against us. My tribe or your tribe.
Yeah, conflict is a good one. That makes sense. I'd read that chapter.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd want to live it, but I don't get a choice.
Yep.
I overheard a couple neighbors talking the other day, and they were saying, like, it's interesting times we live in, and one of them was saying, "Yeah, isn't that an old curse? Like, may you live in interesting times." Because I think we are in interesting times. There's been harder times. There's been people.
You can imagine 1943.
Yeah.
And growing up, my father was that era. I bet they said, "Yeah, we're living in interesting times," and they literally didn't know how. I mean, they didn't have the vantage point of history. They literally did not know.
Yeah.
What's the world going to look like in 5 years?
When you go into a world war, there's a possibility, like, is this world going to end?
Yeah.
Is this the end of the world that we live in?
How are we going to be on the receiving end of oppression for years to come or decades to come?
Yeah, I'm thinking what I don't know if I have a great answer for that question. If I asked myself, like, what would I name this chapter? But I'm thinking something about the self or humanism. I think we're so interested in ourself, and obviously not everybody. There is still a lot of faith out there. There's a lot of faiths out there, plural, not just the Christian faith. There's a lot of spiritualism out there and interest in the spirituality. But I think it's coming so much from a place of self and humanistic viewpoint and what's best for me, that it's muddied. It's very muddied.
And I think that's why I would name it conflicted. I think because the data says that people are actually interested in spiritual things.
Yeah.
People aren't becoming totally secular in the sense of I'm not a theist. Spiritual things don't interest me.
Yeah.
Actually, the rise in spiritual interest is growing. But I think, again, though, it's conflicted with I've got a bunch of bad memories. There's a bunch of bad history, and the church doesn't get off scot-free in this. I think we've added to that conflictedness in the sense of the church has made some big mistakes. And been caught in big mistakes or errors or misconducts and things. So it's added to the who do I believe and what's really true and who can I trust? Who can be trusted?
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, in a season like that, I think this is a little bit of a rabbit trail, but I think there's a lot of people that have something to sell that want to take advantage of that conflictedness. Like during the pandemic, stuff with certain things. If you invested in testing companies, if you had stock in Zoom, if you had stock in people who made masks, and so you made a significant amount of money. Gun sales, ammo, security systems, whatever. So in times of conflictedness or times of crisis, there's people that want to take advantage of that, and we have to be careful.
Yeah, we kind of talked last week about the deconstruction movement within Christianity, within individual Christians who are deconstructing their faith, and some of them at the end, all they have is rubble. They've deconstructed it completely. There's nothing left. And the other healthier ones that have said, oh, there's some things I need to take a critical look at with God. They're not trying to do it alone, trying to do it with God and with community, and have realized like, I have some practices in here that aren't Christian. They're culturally Christian, but maybe they're not biblical. Right. And so I need to remove those. And we kind of talked about what's a load-bearing wall, what has to stay, what can you not remove from Christianity? Because if you remove it, you don't have Christianity anymore, the resurrection being probably the main pillar. If you take the resurrection out of Christianity, you don't have Christianity anymore.
It's basically up for grabs.
Yeah. So, thinking in terms of now, what time are we in, it's interesting to see the questions that are being asked of the church, like, hey, and kind of in a way probing, like knocking on the wall. Is there studs in here? Is this is this solid? Are you guys going to love me? And then the questions from the 80s that I remember as a young person were intellectual questions about the resurrection of Jesus and the authenticity of the creation story, and whether or not the Bible is accurate or has contradictions in it. I remember confronting those kind of things. But now the questions that are being asked, those are still out there. But I feel like there's a lot more moral questions being asked of, is the church good?
Yeah.
Is Jesus good? Are these teachings moral or immoral? Which would have blown me away as a kid to be asked that question. Is the Bible's view of sexuality moral or immoral? I'd say, well, it is the paramount, understanding of the moral sexual ethic. But now the culture is kind of knocking on that wall, say, do we have to keep that, or can we throw that out of Christianity? In the times that we live in, it doesn't make sense anymore to still have the biblical sexual ethic that you guys are holding to. So
using back to the illustration of conflictedness or confluence of streams, it's I've done some kayaking, I'm not a professional, but you get in rough water and you have to pay attention that you don't capsize or tip over. Well, it's almost like I have this picture of God on the banks, yelling, "I'll meet you at the other end. I'll meet you down below," because He's in charge of the flow of those rivers. He's in charge of the flow of history, and he's not tipped over, but we're the ones, the church or people or my faith, we're the ones. In fact, it's interesting, we even use that as a term, like, oh, that incident, that thing really tipped me over. In other words, it capsized my life, capsized me emotionally, that disappointment. And I just think there's a lot of that out there. I think a lot of people have experienced trauma or disappointment or something with God, with men, with institutions, and in a sense, it has tipped them over. Right. And they're flailing. And but I think God stands at the bank saying, "I'll be here when you get your bearings. I'll be here when you get upright again."
Often when we start like a sermon on Sunday, if I'm the one who's kind of praying, I'll pray something to the effect of, thank you for your word. And we want to come underneath your word today. Like we want to trust your word. We want to believe your word. We want to come underneath your word and believe what it says and obey what it says. And I think that's really, really key in navigating these waters. Well, what's true north? Because if I decide what's true north, then everything's up.
It's up for grabs.
Whatever I decide is what I decide, and the individual is Lord. The individual is king. But if there is someone higher than I, someone whose authority is greater than mine, because his wisdom is greater and his power is greater and his goodness is greater, then I should be looking to that. It would be immoral for me to do anything else, but in these times to ask him, when am I? Yeah. And how should I then live, would be the question from Hebrews, and one that Francis Schaeffer famously wrote a book about and spoke to in his generation. If you haven't paid attention to Francis Schaeffer before, I encourage you to do that. He was a quirky philosophical gentleman, but he had a lot of brilliant things to say about his times. And we need that thinking today.
And I think even like that's the beauty. This one last plug, I guess, the beauty, in my opinion, of healthy Christian community, because we're not the only community that exists in the world. There's all kinds of other communities. I understand that, but I think what's unique about the Christian community is that if it's authentic, is it's rooted and grounded not in just the last 20 years, but it's rooted and grounded in 2,000 years of history. Some of the history was great, some of it was not so great. And then beyond that, it's rooted and grounded in God dealing with a people, God dealing with a nation, God dealing with individuals. So God has been there, like I say, on the banks. I saw the last set of rapids. I've seen this one. I've seen them all to come. I'm waiting when you come up for air. I'll be there. But in Christian community, you have this incredible beauty of, hopefully, of generational wisdom. At Church on the Hill, we have everything from 3 to 93, right? And so in that, I was just talking to somebody just this morning. They're celebrating their birthday this weekend, 93 years old, been married for 72 years. Well,
wow.
I'd love to interview those people. I'd love to hear the chapters of 73 years. What are those? Were all those chapters wonderful, or was there some, was there some tension in the book, in the story? Was there any treachery in the story? Were there surprises along the way? What were the beautiful points? What were the tough points? Right, and that's what makes for a great story, right? A great novel. It's like, it has all the elements, but in the community of God, we have a wide range of experience and wisdom and understanding.
That's a great way to understand your time. Talk to someone who's lived through other ones.
Talk to somebody, yeah.
For some people on the young side, this is the only time you know, and it's hard to really understand it.
Yeah. How would you have any perspective?
Yeah, but for someone who has lived 93 years, he's lived through a few phases of life and can share some wisdom with you. I love our older members because they've hung in there with us, even when culturally maybe they'd prefer hymns, for instance, or they have their preferences, but they realize like it's okay. Some things can change. Some of these walls can move.
Movable.
Yeah, as long as they haven't gotten rid of the resurrection of Jesus Christ and the authority of the Bible.
Still telling the truth.
Yeah, then I'm going to hang in here with these guys, and I just absolutely love that.
Yeah, and I love the new generation that brings in fresh creativity, fresh ideas, fresh vision, fresh passion, all that. And I think that's the beauty. You can marry passion with wisdom and learn from each other and listen to one another. And
2,000 years ago, Paul said to the Ephesians, "Wake up, sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil." And he said, "Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is." So he was encouraging people 2,000 years ago, pay attention to when you're living, and then pay attention to how you're living in those times. And don't be foolish, but be wise.
Yeah. It's interesting. I had, probably a 30-something not too long ago say, you guys in the church, you just kind of talk about the same things over and over again. And I said, yeah, we kind of do. Because we want to, we're talking about rhythms that have been basically rhythms that people have tapped into for thousands of years now. Again, styles change or the surface stuff changes, but...
That's so funny. It reminds me of like when I'm a kid and I'm like, oh, my dad's always going on about this.
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh, my dad just doesn't get it. All he ever talks about is the bills or the, whatever.
I don't work for the power company.
Yeah. And then you grow up and you're like, oh, I get what dad was talking about and why he said it so many times because I wasn't listening.
And now I'm my dad.
Yeah. Do you follow me here for a second? We'll end. But do you have? I don't remember ever seeing a picture of your guys' wedding. Do you have pictures of your wedding?
We do, but not very many. Just a couple. We got married in a little obscure place in an obscure time. We were brand new believers, and we were young in our early 20s. And
did you have a tie on? Did you
no, I don't. I did have.
Like
no, I
jacket?
Actually had a suit. I don't know where it came from, but and my wife made her own dress. And we were far from family in a new place, and in a new. It was basically a new time for us. We were brand new believers, and so our wedding was super simple. Cake and snacks and
ours is pretty simple too. We had cake and snacks and probably just a little bit bigger than yours, but still small. And my wife was in a white dress that she'd bought. It felt like the most money in the world back then. I think it was $330 or something.
It wasn't quite the extravaganza that we do today.
Big puff sleeves. If you saw them now, and I had a back then guys were actually wearing tuxes. Nobody does it anymore, but and I had a black tux with a black and white polka dot black and white polka dot.
Were there ruffles?
Bow tie? No.
Oh, no
bow tie
ruffles.
and cummerbund.
Yeah.
I say that to say, like, I remember thinking, like, let's do a timeless wedding. Let's do something that won't get outdated. And like just a few years later, I'm like, these look ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so just in thinking of the times that you live in, like just if you're old enough, look back at some of the things you wore in the past. And if you're willing to reevaluate some of those fashion choices, maybe you should reevaluate.
Maybe there's some other areas.
Yeah, maybe there's some thinking you should reevaluate.
Isn't it funny? People will often look at their wedding pictures and they'll say, "Oh, we were just kids."
Yeah.
Which is a pretty accurate assessment, but at the time, you felt all adultish.
Yeah.
You know,
I was totally an adult.
Yeah, we're renting a limo. I'm renting a tuxedo.
I drove off in a '68 Chevy Impala.
Nice.
Yeah, what were you driving back then?
I don't remember, but it wasn't the Impala.
You didn't have your Toyota Stout?
No, I don't know what we did, but yeah.
Well, yeah, folks, we're going to keep doing this for a few weeks, just looking at the times we live in and taking some time to examine them. I encourage you to do that with us and, follow along. Join us on Sundays. We'd be happy to see you there. Hope you're doing well.
Yeah. Have a great week. Enjoy summer. There's only a few weeks left.
Yep. See you soon.